was a cold, quiet January night in 2015 on the prestigious Stanford University campus, a place filled with ambition, dreams, and youthful energy. Among the thousands of students was Brock Turner, a 20-year-old star swimmer praised for his athletic ability and promising future. He was living the life many envied, but on the night of January 18th, his entire world collapsed. At around 1:15 a.m., two Swedish graduate students were biking home from a party, enjoying the calm of the early morning, when they heard disturbing sounds coming from behind a fraternity building. Strange noises, heavy breathing, muffled movement. Curious and concerned, they slowed down, parked their bikes, and decided to investigate. Behind a dumpster, they stumbled upon a horrifying sight. A young woman, unconscious, lying motionless on the cold, hard ground. Her hair was tangled, her dress pulled up, her body exposed to the freezing air. Standing nearby was Brock Turner. Without hesitation, the two students tackled him, pinned him down, and held him until police arrived. Their brave actions saved the woman from further harm and set off a chain of events that would soon captivate the nation. Police arrived within minutes and arrested Turner on the spot. The young woman, just 18 years old, was rushed to the hospital, unaware of the trauma inflicted upon her. Soon, the evidence began stacking up. DNA, eyewitness accounts, and Brock Turner caught red-handed. His arrest made headlines, but the true shock came later when Turner was sentenced to just 6 months in county jail with the possibility of early release. The nation was outraged. People questioned, how could such a violent crime be met with such a light punishment? Was it because he was an athlete? Because of his privileged background? The young woman, later revealed as Chanel Miller, refused to stay silent. She wrote a victim impact statement, a raw, honest, emotional account of her pain that went viral and sparked worldwide discussions. This story became a symbol of injustice, a brutal reminder of how society treats victims and how status can influence justice. And this was only the beginning. The news traveled fast. Within days, the case of Brock Turner exploded across local news and quickly grabbed national headlines. Stanford's prestigious name, combined with the horrifying details, sparked public outrage. Social media feeds filled with disbelief. People couldn't understand how a young woman could be so brutally attacked behind a dumpster at one of America's top universities, while the suspect, a privileged athlete, was being described by the media in shockingly gentle terms. Headlines called Turner a star swimmer. News outlets highlighted his athletic achievements, his clean-cut image, his potential future in competitive sports. But the victim remained nameless, faceless, reduced to anonymous descriptions, while her pain was buried beneath glowing commentary about Turner's swimming times and lost Olympic dreams. People across the country noticed the pattern, and they were furious. Questions echoed in every corner of the internet. Why was Turner's image being protected? Why did the media care about his swimming records more than the assault itself? But the outrage didn't stop there. When the trial began, more disturbing details came to light. Prosecutors revealed Turner had attempted to flee the scene when confronted. He tried to run until the two Swedish students tackled him down and pinned him. Medical reports confirmed the young woman had severe physical injuries and high levels of alcohol in her system. She had no memory of the attack. But even as the facts stacked up, the defense painted a very different picture. Turner's legal team argued that it was a misunderstanding, that both parties were drunk, that Turner's promising future should not be destroyed over what they called a tragic mistake. The trial lasted months, every detail scrutinized by the media and the public. Then came the sentencing. Judge Aaron Persky handed down a 6-month jail sentence, citing Turner's young age, lack of criminal history, and concern for the severe impact that prison could have on him. 6 months. Turner would end up serving just 3. The decision sent shockwaves far beyond California. Across the country, survivors of sexual assault felt betrayed. Advocates called it a slap on the wrist, proof that the justice system protected the privileged and punished the vulnerable. A movement was beginning to swell, and at the center of it was a brave young woman determined to reclaim her voice. Then, something happened that no one expected. Just before sentencing, the young woman, who had remained anonymous throughout the trial, prepared a statement. A victim impact statement that would become one of the most powerful testimonies ever read in an American courtroom. When Chanel Miller stood before the court, her voice steady but filled with pain, she began to tell the world exactly what Turner had done to her. Word by word, she detailed the humiliation, the fear, the trauma, and the lasting scars left behind. Her statement wasn't just about one drunken night. It was about how the system treated victims, how headlines glorified perpetrators, how courts protected privilege and dismissed the devastation left in the aftermath of sexual assault. She described waking up in the hospital with no memory of what happened, how she had learned through a news article what Turner had done to her before police even told her, how strangers knew intimate details about her body before she did. Her words were raw, honest, and heart-wrenching, and the world listened. When Chanel's statement was published online, it went viral instantly. In just a few days, it was read over 11 million times, shared across every platform, discussed on every news channel, quoted by celebrities, politicians, and activists worldwide. For the first time, people weren't just talking about Brock Turner's future. They were hearing the voice of the survivor. Chanel's bravery transformed the narrative. Her words gave voice to countless victims who had suffered in silence. She exposed the flaws in a justice system that valued athletic records over personal dignity. Her impact was undeniable. Soon, public protests began. Petitions to remove the judge gathered hundreds of thousands of signatures. Media outlets that once praised Turner were forced to confront their bias. Chanel had turned her pain into power. This wasn't just about one case anymore. It had become a national reckoning about how society handles sexual assault and how survivors are silenced while perpetrators are protected. The world was finally listening. As the world read Chanel Miller's powerful words, the ripple effects couldn't be stopped. In homes, on college campuses, in workplaces, people asked the same question: how could justice fail so completely? The public outrage turned directly toward the man who handed down the lenient sentence, Judge Aaron Persky. Thousands, then millions, signed petitions demanding Persky be removed from the bench. It was unprecedented, a sitting judge becoming a national villain. The anger wasn't just about Brock Turner anymore. It was about every victim who had been ignored, every survivor who had been silenced, every privileged offender who walked free, while victims carried the scars. News channels, once hesitant, started covering the protests. Survivors of assault came forward, sharing their stories, using the momentum sparked by Chanel's statement. In California, something historic began. A formal campaign to recall Judge Persky gathered massive support. Volunteers knocked on doors, marched, spread awareness, and collected signatures with one goal in mind: justice must have consequences. Turner's sentence became a rallying cry. The world scrutinized every angle of the case. Why was Turner's potential deemed more valuable than Chanel's trauma? Why did his swimming records receive more attention than his crime? Why did the system offer excuses for perpetrators and none for survivors? Stanford University faced immense backlash too. Students protested, alumni withheld donations demanding reform and justice on their own campus. In June 2016, Turner was released after serving only 3 months. Cameras followed his every move, reporters waited outside his family's home. But Turner had no more praise, no more glory. His name became a symbol of injustice, a reminder of a system that had failed. And then, in a groundbreaking decision, Judge Persky became the first California judge in over 80 years to be recalled by voters. For many, it was a victory, a sign that people would no longer accept injustice disguised as leniency. But for Chanel, the wounds remained. Behind the headlines was still a young woman rebuilding her life, piecing together her identity after a system tried to silence her. For years, the world only knew her as Emily Doe, the anonymous victim in court documents whose words shook the world, but whose face remained hidden. But Chanel was never content to stay in the shadows. In September of 2019, the world finally learned her real name, Chanel Miller. With courage and raw honesty, she stepped forward, unmasked and unafraid, releasing her memoir titled Know My Name. The book wasn't just a retelling of a horrific crime. It was a declaration of survival, of healing, of reclaiming personal power in the face of a system that had tried to erase her. Her words, again, captured the world's attention. The New York Times, Time magazine, and countless others praised her bravery, calling her book essential reading for a generation. Through her pages, Chanel revealed the devastating aftermath of trauma, the sleepless nights, the anxiety, the fear of stepping into the world knowing strangers had dissected her most vulnerable moments. But she also spoke of resilience, of finding peace in art, in writing, in advocacy, of learning that while trauma leaves lasting scars, it doesn't have to define you. With Know My Name, Chanel forced the world to see survivors as whole people, not courtroom exhibits, not tabloid headlines, but individuals with dreams, futures, and strength beyond imagination. She toured universities, spoke at conferences, stood in front of audiences, reclaiming the narrative and reminding everyone that her story was not one of defeat, but of victory. Meanwhile, the ripple effect of her bravery continued to reshape conversations about sexual violence. Laws were re-examined, sentencing practices scrutinized, campuses reviewed their policies on consent and accountability. The Brock Turner case, which once symbolized injustice, now became a catalyst for change. And Chanel, no longer hidden, stood tall as a symbol of that change. But beneath her remarkable strength, she often reminded the world this story was never about heroism. It was about humanity. It was about seeing victims, hearing survivors, and ensuring no one else would ever be silenced again. The courtroom verdict may have ended the legal battle, but it ignited the national firestorm. The name Brock Turner no longer just belonged to an athlete. It became A symbol of privilege, of broken justice, of a system where the powerful too often walked free, while the voices of victims were buried under silence. In the months that followed, the outrage spread far beyond the campus of Stanford. It spilled onto the streets, into legislative halls, and across the media. People were angry, frustrated, demanding answers. How could a man found guilty of such a brutal crime be sentenced to just 6 months and serve only 3? California lawmakers couldn't ignore the outcry. Under pressure from thousands of protesters and advocates, they passed a historic law, Assembly Bill 2888. From that day forward, any sexual assault where the victim was unconscious or intoxicated would carry a mandatory prison sentence. No probation, no leniency, no excuses. The Brock-Turner Law became a beacon of change, a line drawn in the sand saying, enough is enough. But the ripple effect didn't stop there. Across the country, university policies were rewritten. Mandatory consent education became the new standard. Students demanded accountability from their institutions, and Title IX investigations faced unprecedented scrutiny. In living rooms and classrooms, difficult conversations finally began to happen. Parents talked to their children, schools taught affirmative consent, and the media faced its reckoning for glamorizing perpetrators while ignoring victims. Chanel Miller's bravery breathed life into the growing Me Too movement, turning whispers into roars, transforming shame into strength. Survivors, once afraid to speak, stood tall, told their stories, and were finally being believed. Brock-Turner might have walked free after 3 months, but his name would forever be remembered, not as a star swimmer, but as the man who exposed the cracks in the justice system and unknowingly helped ignite a revolution. And for Chanel, those scars remained. She had reclaimed her power and given millions permission to reclaim theirs. The story of Brock-Turner and Chanel Miller is not just a chapter in one city's history, it's a call to action for the entire world. It reminds us that behind every headline, every court case, every statistic, there are real people, victims, survivors, fighters, whose lives have been forever changed. Chanel's bravery transformed pain into power. Her voice, once silenced by fear and trauma, now echoes through millions of hearts, inspiring change, demanding justice, and shining a light on the dark corners of society. But the fight is far from over. Sexual violence continues to plague communities everywhere. Too many survivors still suffer in silence. Too many predators evade accountability. Yet with every new law passed, every conversation started, every survivor who dares to speak, progress is made. It is a collective journey, one that calls on all of us to listen, to believe, and to act. As we remember this case, let it serve as a reminder. Change begins when we refuse to look away. Justice is not a destination, it is a path we walk together. And every step forward, every voice raised, brings us closer to a world where survivors are supported, perpetrators are held accountable, and healing is possible. Chanel Miller's story will live on, not just as a painful memory, but as a beacon of hope, courage, and relentless determination. Because when one person speaks the truth, they can change everything. The fight continues, and together we can make a difference. Thank you.